as I turn on my microphone. SB 161, prime sponsor. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you, members of the committee. It's nice to be back with ENR. Mr. Chairman, for the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins-Coca from District 21, here to introduce SB 161 relative to low, moderate income community solar projects. This bill is relatively simple. Looks that way, doesn't it? What it does at its base is allows housing authorities to be eligible, projects that are housing authorities and other rental properties to qualify under the eligibility criteria for grants at the state level intended to benefit low-income customers. In many cases, the low-income customers that live in public or rented housing actually have their utility bills paid by their landlord. So while the utility costs still exist and the benefits of a solar project still exist, there's sort of a technical glitch where the resident themselves is not the account holder. So all we're trying to do here is to fix that. In fixing that, we also just expanded it beyond housing authorities to other rental properties where the same residents would reside. So we just wanted to capture all eligible low-income customers in the fix. And Josh Meehan is here to speak in a little more detail to the technical aspects of that. But
don't you love that? Somebody else is behind you.
Yes, they've been working very hard, and I can follow along, but that's different than explaining it all. And so, from my perspective, this is a great fix to our program, which we all agreed to from a policy perspective back in 2019. And so making sure that it's something that our residents can use on a practical level just makes good common sense. So the only other thing I'll say is I am introducing an amendment to this bill, which I believe the committee has. Nick has. Okay, 0283S. It's a...
You got an extra copy? I think I actually left it in my office. Thank you. Oh, there you go. I thought I had one in my office. Thank you.
And
you're good.
And we'll speak to the changes from the bill that are present in the amendment, but it's basically just a last-minute adjustment to the income qualifications for the residents to make sure we're capturing the right audience. And then I will also just say New Hampshire Housing got in touch with me a few minutes ago, and they just haven't gotten a full chance to look at the bill. So to the extent they have comments, I may bring those to you guys. But I think other than that, I'll stop there and take any questions that I am able to answer.
Thank you, Senator. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none. All right.
All right.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Josh, if you want to come in. Joshua Meehan. There's your man. Meehan.
Josh,
not Elliot.
Sorry?
Right? There's another Josh behind you.
Yeah, there's lots of Josh.
Yeah, there's your twin. There you go.
Hi, other Josh.
All right.
There's not usually more than one of us in a room, so that's kind of interesting.
Yes, you are. All right. It's all yours.
All right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Josh Meehan. I'm the Executive Director of Keene Housing, the City of Keene's Public Housing Authority, and the Chair of the New Hampshire Housing Authority Corporation's Legislative Committee. I live in Keene. I'm speaking in support of Senate Bill 161, which would allow organizations like Keene Housing to apply for low, moderate income community solar grants at our properties where utilities are included in the rent. We've applied twice for grant funding through the Community Solar Program and twice been found ineligible because electricity is included in the rent that we charge our residents. Keene Housing owns and manages almost 600 units of affordable housing in Keene, Swansea, and Marlborough. 43% of our residents are disabled. 40% of the households we serve have children. And while over 90% of our work-able households are employed, the majority of the households we serve earn less than 30% of the area median income, which for a family of four in Keene is $32,470 per year. Keene is a city of approximately 23,000 people. We currently have over 2,000 households on our waiting lists. Households with children may wait up to 2 years for a 2-bedroom apartment. And depending on which property they choose, elderly applicants can wait up to 7 years before we have an apartment for them. We receive no state or local funding for maintaining our aging housing stock or to develop new housing. Instead, we rely on a combination of federal operating subsidy and a patchwork of federal grants and tax credits, neither of which are sources that we control. The only thing we have some degree of control over is our operating costs. Every dollar we can save there, we redeploy to maintain our aging housing stock, improve our self-sufficiency and supportive services programming for residents, and to develop new, desperately needed housing. Unfortunately, multifamily housing is an energy-intensive business. As everyone is aware, electricity rates are skyrocketing, and even though we secure our electricity through power purchase agreements, we are still impacted by rising costs. This year, our operating budget for the housing that we own and manage is $2.5 million, with $570,400, or fully a third of that, budgeted to cover electricity costs. To date, we've done extensive energy efficiency retrofitting and building envelope tightening throughout our portfolio. We've completed 3 solar projects through solar power purchase agreements, or solar PPAs so far, generating around 0.5 megawatt of the 3.75 megawatts that we consume annually. While we're proud of our progress, the solar PPAs don't supply us with free energy, as would be the case if we own those arrays outright. And I understand nothing is actually free, but it's in a relative term. Instead, they lock in per kilowatt hour rates that are typically less than the Eversource default rate. So this brings me back to SB 161. If we were able to access the grants to help us build solar projects that we would eventually or initially own outright, that would either reduce the payback time on the solar PPAs. We would also be able to do more projects, be less leveraged, and more quickly and significantly reduce our operating costs. So allowing us access to the low and moderate income community solar grant program that to date we've mostly been shut out of would directly and positively impact our ability to maintain our existing portfolio, improve the services we offer our residents, and increase our region's housing stock without requiring any new local, state, or federal funding. SB 161's passage wouldn't be a panacea for our housing crisis, but it would be an important contribution towards our collective effort to solve this seemingly intractable problem. And I just want to take a sec to thank everyone who advocated for and worked on this bill, and most importantly, on behalf of the thousands of Granite Staters we serve, and especially the tens of thousands of Granite Staters who are on our waiting list collectively amongst all the affordable housing providers in the state. So I don't know if that was technical enough, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
You're fine. Did you look at the amendment?
I have, yes.
And can you comment on it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the difference, the amended version changes the income eligibility from 300% of federal poverty level to 80% of area median income. The reason for that is in the affordable housing universe, federal poverty line isn't a metric that we use. AMI, area median income, is one, and that's the federal standard. So for example, 80% of AMI is the federal definition of low income. And just, this is a moderate to low income program. So that everybody would be caught in there. You wouldn't accidentally have to do weird math that we're not used to doing because we're sort of conditioned to do a certain type of math, and that's based around AMI.
Wonderful. Senator Waters with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming over from Keene.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I particularly appreciate this bill and your testimony today because I'm certainly hearing about this from our public housing in Dover and also the community action partnerships. And I imagine, if we're going to open up the opportunities for cheaper renewable energy to lower income folks, this is the way to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, what we're always stymied by is that we provide the utilities to that probably the majority of our residents, and because of the way the statute reads right now, we're cut out from applying for these grants for those properties, which also happen to be our oldest properties, because a lot of our properties were built when electricity was super cheap and set up in such a way that we provide the utilities and the heat is also electric. So.
And thank you. And just about, a couple of years ago in Somersworth, the extraordinary redo of the public housing there to weatherize, update the utilities and so on. The savings are extraordinary. And so my last question is, because we all have community action partnerships and most of the public housing in our districts, I mean, wouldn't you say was the original intent of this program to allow groups to aggregate lower income folks so that there'd be enough people there involved for investment purposes?
Yeah, I believe that is correct, and I would just say that the purpose of SB 161 is to open up the grant program more broadly, because, as I say, every dollar that we save, even if our residents don't pay their bills, their utility bill, every dollar that we save by finding a lot, and energy efficiency is where we started. Building envelope is where we started. LED retrofitting is where we started. We do blower tests on every building that we have, every unit that we have, and have for some time. But what we're down to now is, okay, we've done all that work. We need to start producing energy as much as we possibly can. And the idea here is to open this up so that in cases where the owner provides the electricity, we're not cut out from being able to get that grant funding, which enables us to do these solar projects, which have a direct benefit to our residents, even if they're not getting $1 off their bill for the dollar we save in the electricity. That's, as I said, that's how we have savings that we can redeploy into our properties, into resident services, et cetera.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Senator Bertzel with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually think he just answered it, because my question was going to be, if you own the properties, how does this benefit the people who live in the properties? And I think you might have just answered that, but can you
Sure.
run through that?
Yeah, I guess what the easiest way to describe it is our income, as I said in my testimony a little bit and touched on, is almost completely out of our control. And our stock is aging, and the Fed is not necessarily going to keep up with our actual increased costs, because our money comes from federal appropriations, kind of winds its way to HUD, and we have contracts with HUD, and it winds its way to us. So for our existing portfolio of 600 units, some of which is from the late 19th century all the way to the 2014s, but the majority of it in the 60s, 70s era, those properties are aging much, much faster than any adjustment we get in the rents we get from the subsidy we receive from HUD. So what we do is we can reduce our operating costs where we can, and then that's how we free up funds to put back into windows, to put back into roofs, to put back into converting these old ETS, electric thermal systems that we have that were post-World War II British technology that were put in the 70s. We're replacing those with heat pumps. And the only way we can do that is by kind of like squeezing every dollar out of the properties that we have, and then finding grant funding and kind of putting all that stuff together. You're welcome.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very
And
much.
now for Joshua to come up. The other Josh. All right. You folks okay with this so far? It's good, Bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs, New Hampshire Department of Energy. The two Joshes did get confusing in the email chain, so this is just carrying that forward. So the department is neutral on the bill. However, as you heard from Mr. Meehan as well as from the prime sponsor, this is designed to open up the current LMI solar grant program to housing authorities and sort of their look-alike entities, for lack of a better way of putting it. As this is one of the programs that falls within policy and programs, as mentioned, there have been a couple of applicants who have been public housing authorities in the past. Unfortunately, based on the language of the statute, we were forced to disqualify them from actually being able to access those funds for one particular purpose, or really one and only purpose. If you're looking at the bill, on line 4, you see about halfway through, it says benefit a group of at least 5 residential end-use customers. If you look at the rest of the statute, customer is always, is sort of the definition is built around someone who has an individual meter in their unit. So as by definition, a lot of these public housing authorities, there's one master meter. Therefore, the residents weren't actually technically technically the customers, which is where the department got hung up. As much as we wanted to give out this money, we did two RFP rounds last year, hoping somebody would come in and be able to get these funds. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. We did carry those funds forward, so we were able to do 2 years of allocation for this current year, and the application period closed, and I'm happy to say I can't go into details, but had a number of applicants. But long story short, this will help the department sort of get these funds out to the folks who are those LMI, in that LMI category.
And the amendment's okay? Your thoughts?
Yes, so as Mr. Meehan had mentioned, this was sort of a last minute fix, so I'm impressed OLS was able to get it turned around so quickly, but glad we caught it. But yes, it'll make it, my understanding, it'll make it much easier from an administrative point of view from the housing authorities to actually be able to, rather than have to go through any complex math or having to go through additional income verification measures, for a second time when they're not really needed. From the department standpoint, we're completely fine with that. 80% of area median income is actually pretty close to 300% of federal poverty level, a couple thousand either way, depending on where you are. So no concerns with the amendment.
Great. Senator Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, Josh, it would be accurate to say that Governor Sununu has made it a priority to make sure that renewable energy resources get down to the lower income folks and benefit them?
Yes, I believe he has made comments to that effect in the past, yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any further comments, questions? Well done. Thank you, Josh. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. And anybody else want to speak on this? You do? Okay. Welcome. It's your bill. She's back.
I just wanted to step back up to say New Hampshire Housing actually got back to me while I was sitting here, and they're fine with the amendment. The bill is amended, so they're signed off as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. Seeing nobody else wants to testify on this, I will close the hearing on this, and I will entertain a motion of exec. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any,
Move up to pass.
I'll second.
61.
second, all in favor? Now,
And I'll move the amendment.
is there a second?
Second.
So let's vote on the motion. Yeah, okay. All on the amendment. Everybody okay with the amendment? 0283S. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
Move up to pass as amended.
Second.
Second. All discussion.
The upkeep there, pal.
What's that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none.
Consent?
Yes.
Second.
Oh, she got me. I said yes.
Seconded by Senator Bertzel. All in favor? All in favor on consent, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. And who would like to take this out?
I'm in favor of Senator
I'll-
Waters taking this up.
I'll take it out.
We'll let Senator Bertzel take it out this time.
All right.
This will be our first one on energy. Good for you. Lucky. So
My
Senator,
guess.
Senator Bertzel will take it out. Is there a motion to move out of exec?
So we'll.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, seeing none. And I recognize Senator Waters.
Not saying anything else.
Good job. Congratulations, Senator. There's going to be a timeout very shortly. Yeah, I know, I'm going to separate you two. Senator Waters, you are recognized. SB 166 FM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Senator David Waters, District 4, introducing Senate Bill 166 relative to grid modernization and some other stuff too. I want to start out by giving my thanks to a lot of partners on this, on the grid modernization side, particularly Senator Perkins Quokka. Thank you, Josh, and others from Department of Energy, Clean Energy New Hampshire, Consumer Advocate Cliff Bilo, whom you'll be hearing from, and particularly from the utilities, Michael Avocado, who we'll hear from, and the other utilities as well. So what this bill proposes to do is to introduce some market-based improvements, pricing, to increase resources, to increase competition, and lower costs through a variety of means of grid modernization, distributed energy resources, transactive energy, and other things that are part of this package. There has been a working group of folks on many issues of grid modernization, and we need that in the bill, so that's in there. so that, you know, a lot of issues, and I think some of the issues that opposition has kind of taken on the bill after conversation with Michael Licata, I think we might kick into under the working group, because there are some complications, and figuring out just how we're going to do things is important. You also will find the bill changing some of the battery storage definitions, so that vehicle to grid technology is explicitly mentioned in battery storage. And then you also find in the bill towards the end, there's been expressed a great need for technical expertise for grid modernization and other work. And both the DOE and the PUC and the grid modernization group in this bill can really need some technical expertise. And that's why we allows the Consumer Advocate's Office to have consultants on that. Well, you know, why do we need to get into this area? Probably grid modernization is going to be one of the biggest challenges that we face over the next few years. But I think it's also one of the greatest potentials we have in a long time, maybe since the 1990s, to really transform what our markets do and our capacity to provide service. Now, the challenge and potential are driven in large part by renewable resources, you know, but also by new technology and also by transformations in the energy markets. For New Hampshire, we have huge opportunities through grid modernization. You know, I'm always talking about offshore wind, but we might be onshoring up to 3.6 gigawatts of power. You know, the auctions are next June to September, and as part of that auction, they got to know what they're going to do about grid and how they're going to get the power here. So that's a huge opportunity for New Hampshire, but also a huge necessity to get our grid ready for these new power sources. But then there are other renewables as well. You know, solar and hydrogen, as we'll hear later, coming in. We need to figure out how we're going to have the grid ready for that as well. I've given you a folder with a variety of materials. The first few handouts there are on grid modernization. I just wanted to mention, you know, where ISO New England you know, kind of summarizes it, and you know, why ISO New England sees grid modernization as a priority across the 6 New England states. First off is providing consumers here and creating a marketplace that you would have information, you have price structures, you know the technologies, incentives, and tools that can empower consumers to use electricity more efficiently, that saves money, and reduce their individual energy costs. Also, this is a way of improving the operational efficiency of the grid, which should save some money for our utilities. Particularly during peak times, we went through one of those a few weeks ago. When the grid is most stressed, and electricity is most expensive, how can we use peak shaving and other methods through grid modernization to make sure we're not paying those high prices? It can also help reduce transmission and distribution system operation, maintenance, construction costs by reducing electricity demands in times of system peaks. So if you have a less high peak, you don't need as much infrastructure. Also, this is an opportunity to reduce the wholesale, regional, and retail electricity costs by reducing electricity demand at times of system peaks. So states need to do this to open up approaches to demand resources, including energy efficiency, demand response, distributed generation, transactive energy, and also to help coordinate that planning with the regional bodies themselves. Now, I would note too, as you'll see in some of the findings of the bill, that this is one of the things that was called for most explicitly in the recent 10-year energy plan from the Department of Energy, is that they identified this area, particularly distributed energy resources and grid modernization, as one that we've got to do something about. I'll also note that, you know, Governor Sununu and the other New England governors wrote a very pointed letter to ISO New England saying that we've got to get at this so that we can reduce our energy costs. So let me go through some of the details of the bill, and I will try also to kind of mention some of the things that I think we need to do a little bit more work on through an amendment over the next week or so. So in the bill, in the first page, you get some of the explanation of why we're experienced some of the difficulties we are about energy costs, and then on lines 9 to 11, you know, okay, what can New Hampshire do? That's been the question, hasn't it? The last few weeks, what can we do to reduce energy costs? And then it turns to number 4 to say, well, I think the 10-year energy plan from the Department of Energy pointed out what we could do. We should pursue, as it says, market-based mechanism for achieving cost-effective energy, avoiding prevention of costs and mandates. And New Hampshire is to seek to foster an environment where new and emerging technologies can flourish by the value of the market. Value they bring to the market. And other goals there still are in this area as well. So this is when the findings return to the issues of distributed energy resources and what we can do about that. And it mentions some of the barriers that we see, not just in New Hampshire, but potentially also from FERC. And again, there's been some pointed criticism of that from the governor. So I think there are some ways that, you know, some things we do in the state, some things it's policy we have to make known otherwise. Now, we know on page 2 that we have reduced a fairly robust competitive market after the restructuring of the 1990s. But we have some more steps to go, because what we haven't been able to do is to get the pricing mechanisms in place so that people can know at intervals just what the price of electricity is and can make their choices accordingly. And that's a great way of helping to regulate the demand and also to make it advantageous for distributed energy resources and transactive energy to put power in, you know, buy it when it's cheap, put it back into the grid when it's more expensive. So there have been some PUC orders on this where we start to turn here in the findings at the bottom of page 2 and in the bill is this issue, okay, well, if we need to have better metering, how do we do it? And it mentioned these AMI meters, advanced meter infrastructure. There's been a lot of conversation around this for several years, and they cost. And there's also some question about which technology of these new meters are going to be used, where it's going to be deployed. So that's a complicated issue. I was reminded by Michael Licata that there was a 2019 order from the PUC to Eversource to get going on this, and I think we'll hear from him that actually they made a lot of progress on it and are about to get a vendor. And and I hope I'm not speaking out of school there, Michael, sorry, whoops. But anyways, I think we need to recognize the good work the utility has done here, and maybe that will change a little bit of what we say needs to be done, because maybe more of it's getting done. But the metering, you know, if we don't have the metering, it's very hard for us to get to grid modernization. So let's, if I could, move forward a little bit to page 4. Give you some definition, pretty much accepted definition of here, a system of economic and control mechanisms that allows the dynamics balance of supply and demand across entire electrical infrastructure using value as a key operational parameter. This provides a framework for continuing to implement electric utility restructuring in New Hampshire. Well, great, but what does that mean? You know, we'd like to have value, we'd like to have cost, we'd like to have rational control mechanisms, but what is that actually going to mean when we get down to how power is supplied? So that's why the Grid Modernization Advisory Group is here on page 4. That what we do need to have is a group that can get together folks from state agencies, the utilities, and a nonprofit organization representative, Community Power Coalition, which is going to be a big player in all of this, of course. Then I'm going to get into some proposed changes here. On line 25, well, what are they going to do? So they advise the department, the distribution utilities, and the commission on emerging issues for grid modernization. We need to plan. This is a group to help move plans forward. Again, I want to recognize that planning is underway, and I think that what we need to do in this tasking here is to carve out what work is already being done by Eversource and other utilities so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, make them start from scratch. So perhaps you know, we could, those lines 28 and 29 might be changed so that we don't get into proprietary trade information from the utilities, but also a way of recognizing that some of that's being done. They're going to report to us, and this should set us up for future legislation, which clearly we're going to need as well. So we've got some definitions here on page 5, which I'll let you go through, particularly starting on line 18. Just, you know, here's where it gets down into the details on that. I'd like to turn to page 6 because I think here you're going to be hearing for some issues about some of the requirements in this bill. So lines 12 through 19 tries to get at an issue that is arising for people who want to develop energy resources. I will give you an example from Dover, but there are many around the state. So the community farm, the farm property, the Stratford County Complex has a lot of old farmland up there, and there's maybe 100 or so acres that are not under conservation easement, which could be used for solar. Across the river, there is the Toland landfill, several hundred acres, which could host solar. So, interesting project. Developers, yeah, this is something that could really provide a lot of power for the county complex and for others. But how do we interconnect? They'd probably have to go over to Madbury or down to South Dover. And the price tag there, which the first person to want to make an interconnection is you know, going to be a lot of money. And suddenly the numbers don't work for the project. So I thought back to when Senator Booton and I did a bill about, and I think it was over towards the Nashua or Merrimack area, where if you were the first developer to come into a property that had been set up as industrial zone or as a, you know, commercial zone, if you're the first one that came in and brought in the infrastructure, you know, sewage and water and power, that then subsequent tenants who came in could pay part of what you initially paid for. So that's why I tried to set it up. But you know, it's complicated because how the heck, who's supposed to manage this? Who's supposed to decide how much money goes back?
Right.
How do you park that money, and what does the PUC do about it? What are the utilities supposed to do about it? But you see the principle there, and I think that maybe that's going to end up something that we have studied by that group. Then the next issue that we're going to hear about, I think, again, getting down to the details, is, all right, well, how to do the price signals? Well, appropriate price signals that incorporate transactive energy distribution system level. That starts to get there, but what are appropriate price signals? Are they 5-minute intervals? Are they 3-minute intervals? And how is that managed? How's that defined? So I think we're going to hear something from the utilities on that one as well as something that maybe we need to figure out a little more. And then if you look to page 7, there's the questions here about the pilots. Now, those who were on the committee previously, you know, we did a lot of work on trying to get these pilots going. There hasn't been one established yet, but there are some projects coming along. And so it seemed like maybe we ought to up that here. I don't think the bill stands or falls on that, but that's why that's here. But it is causing some concern from Chairman Vose and for others. And the same thing, bottom of page 7, top of page 8. You know, here again, I think we need a little more work on that about the pilots. So then on page 8, I will at least point to, because there isn't much, I don't think there's much controversy over this stuff. But you'll see to make sure that electric vehicle charging programs are included under the storage and the demand response practices. I will point to the handout that you have in your folder about New Hampshire Electric Co-op, that they are offering a program where they can use the electric vehicles that are in their catchment area to give people price signals and help them save money by only charging their car when it's less costly, but also the other way around, that if they've got some valuable electricity in the battery and the grid needs it, they can send it back out. This may be a very large part of community power, where, let's say, a community wants to aggregate all the electric vehicles in their area and make it one big storage battery for that municipality and monetize that. Or maybe some of you saw a few weeks ago during the cold snap, the storm out in the Midwest, that electric buses were being parked out in front of emergency medical centers that had lost their power, and the bus battery was keeping those things going. So it's a world I think we need to be, it's here, but also I think we need to be ready for, and those are some definitional changes. And then at the very end there, Mr. Chairman and the committee members, you'll see the consultant. And I will mention too that there is not really a fiscal impact there because that's recoverable cost. Well, I came back from a committee hearing the other day and said out loud to my aide, Cameron, that, gosh, there's somebody in the committee who today was so wordy. And he didn't need to say anything, he just looked at me. But there it is, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Waters. I did have a question and I forgot it.
That's my fault.
No, it's not your fault. Probably wasn't that important. Are there questions from the committee? A lot to digest here, so we'll hear a lot more. Seeing no further questions, well
Thank
done.
you very much.
Senator Perkins Quokka, you want to talk now or you want to talk later? Yes, let's go. You got it. You have the floor.
Yeah. However, I promise to be briefer. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka from District 21, and I just wanted to join David in speaking in support of SB 166. There's a lot here to digest, but from my perspective, this is just a key piece of legislation in having New Hampshire take one step forward on grid modernization. For me, setting policy on grid modernization is about consistency. It's about providing a stable, predictable environment for our small businesses, for our residents, and for all of those making investments and sort of whatever our energy future brings. If our state wants to attract businesses and talent to our state, we have to have an updated, reliable electric system they can count on, and that we have invested in a reliable way. Grid modernization is also key for our ratepayers and residents. We're no strangers to the unpredictability in New Hampshire winters, and we need a modern grid that can respond every year, as we've always seen. So in the spirit of providing a stable, predictable regulatory environment for whatever our future brings, I think that grid modernization itself there's a lot in there. And so having an advisory group at the basic level is a great idea because there's just a lot that needs to be digested. There's a lot that the Department of Energy needs to be advised on. And so making sure that we sort of have a working group of practitioners, I think puts New Hampshire in a good position to be considering this policy proactively, which I think is smart from a prudent perspective. And I also think that having technical advice available that can be contracted by the Office of the Consumer Advocate just makes good sense. The Consumer Advocate can make sure that the investments we're making in our grid are prudent for our ratepayers in the long run. And having that cost be recoverable it also makes sense because, again, all of this is sort of about long-term capital planning. It's about making sure we're investing in the long term in a smart way. So, I think in the long run, thinking long term is always the smartest and cheapest and most fiscally prudent way to plan our policy, and making sure that we have infrastructure that's ready for the next century in sort of the longest term lens, I think just makes good sense. So I also would support Senator Waters mentioned on page 6 in section 6 that it may make sense to move this sort of consideration of cost sharing on interconnection into the grid modernization advisory group. And I just wanted to lend my support to that recommendation. Maine has a system now where as projects line up at substations, you know, they can kind of cost share the amount that it costs to upgrade those substations. And it's not going perfectly smoothly. So I would just say it's an opportunity for us to learn from Maine's mistakes here in New Hampshire. With that part, I will conclude unless anyone has any questions for me.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you,
All right,
Senator.
thank you very much.
So, Mike Licata, you're the last to speak, but you're the only one who opposes at this point, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to get up here and have a comment, and I might even let you follow up after, just so that we can get your perspective. Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. We're good. Oh, I got a few more speakers, yeah, I just.
Thank you, Senator, and I hope I don't have to come up twice. But for the record, Michael Licata representing Eversource. And I just really do want to start off by saying a couple of things. We very, very much appreciate the hard work of Senator Waters and Senator Perkins-Coaca, who did reach out and solicit input, and we always appreciate the opportunity to provide that. And I think Senator Waters touched on a number of the areas that we had some concerns with. As a start, Eversource certainly supports efforts to make our grid more modern and increase the reliability and resiliency of our distribution system to affect good outcomes for our customers. At a high level, one of our concerns with the legislation is it does not appear to take into account the considerable efforts that are currently going on in these very same issue areas, many of them directed by the legislature itself. And just to give you a few examples of that work that are currently ongoing, just last year, the legislature passed Senate Bill 262, which directed the Department of Energy to open up an investigation to look at interconnection standards to enable and facilitate greater adoption of DERs. And that just started in December. Also, just last year, the legislature passed Senate Bill 321, which authorized the creation of pilot projects under LEPA. There are jurisdictional questions as to what is FERC jurisdictional in terms of interstate commerce and what is jurisdictional to the state of New Hampshire. Those pilot programs are contingent upon a finding of the commission on those jurisdictional matters. That proceeding has just started. It's IR 22061. And here we see a rather broad expansion of those pilots, which, again, haven't even been tested because of the jurisdictional questions that arise. Senator Waters mentioned on advanced metering that the company, in its settlement of its last rate case back in 2019, in that settlement agreement, we did agree to conduct a feasibility study with a third-party vendor looking at costs and benefits of transitioning to AMI meters. We are in the process of doing a selection of that vendor. So that is another process that is ongoing. In addition, I'm sure the committee is very well aware that the Public Utilities Commission has launched a proceeding looking at changes to the state's net metering tariffs. That's 22060, as well as there's an ongoing proceeding related to electric vehicle time of use rates, 2170, as well as an investigation looking at utility tariffs to support demand response in EV charging, which actually just had a pre-hearing conference this morning. That's IR 22067. nearly all of those proceedings deal with sort of findings and issues and matters that are contained within the bill. And our concern is that the legislation before you would either create duplicative efforts, short circuit, or delay those ongoing proceedings, all of which relate to grid modernization. We certainly do think that there is value in the legislation. Senator Waters and Senator Perkins-Cuoca discussed creation of an advisory council. We think that there is value in that. We welcome that process. We actually use a similar process in the development of our triennial energy efficiency plans, which are submitted. The EASY Board is the body that assists us there. We would welcome the opportunity to provide some thoughts and input on some additional voices that could be at the table, as well as directing that work, the scope of that work. And then from a practical standpoint, and I know Senator Waters touched on this, there are a number of provisions in the bill, mostly on page 6, that candidly we're not sure how they would be implemented, or even the entity that would be responsible for implementing them. Senator Waters gave a great example of the interconnection issue. The cost causer pays, that's sort of bedrock foundation of utility rate making. And we certainly understand this interconnection issue. It's one that is common also on the transmission system. So I think the recommendation that could be an area that gets looked at as part of this advisory committee would be a welcome one. In addition, the two sections above that related to interconnection requirements and changes to the definition of what constitutes a competitive market and linking competitive price signals, again, is sort of the utility. We're unclear as to what is being asked, candidly, and how we would implement that, and what authorities are allowed there. And so those are potentially other areas that this council could look at. So I know that's a lot, and I don't mean to sound overly negative. We do think that there is real opportunity. We are engaged in I think every one of those proceedings that I mentioned to you. We try to be constructive in all of them. We do have experience in other jurisdictions where we operate that we think can be helpful, and we would very much appreciate the opportunity to work with Senator Waters and other stakeholders on this bill to see what makes sense for New Hampshire. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just so I understand, you said there's potential for duplicate, or did you actually say short circuiting?
Yes.
You did. No pun. Right. Just it's electric. Never mind. Thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate that. I'm sure Senator Waters, you have a number of questions.
Well, not too many, actually.
Yeah.
You'll be happy to hear.
No, I want to understand. Before you do,
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I just have one question about battery storage. A couple of years back, we did this whole thing on a study on transmission, distribution, and generation, and all of a sudden, we got this whole idea of battery storage. It's a new one for me. It's a new field. Can you comment a little bit about that at all, or?
So I guess at a high level, battery storage is a somewhat unique and incredible resource for customers, for grid operators, for the distribution system. The ability, as Senator Waters talked about, to pair battery storage with variable renewables so that you can dispatch that resource. That's always been a concern about large-scale renewable adoption is the dispatchability. as compared to traditional sources of generation. And so as a resource, there is tremendous value there. There have been a number of efforts in the state. Liberty Utilities, not to speak for them, but has a battery storage pilot that is sort of a distributed battery storage pilot with, I believe it's Tesla Powerwalls in people's homes that they can dispatch during times of peak use. Eversource, we had a proposal for a battery storage project that was more utility scale that did not move forward at the Public Utilities Commission. One of my other former employers, New Hampshire Electric Co-op, has a utility scale battery project that they have at their Moulton Borough site that they're able to dispatch. So I think there's tremendous opportunity there, and there is work being done to by the utilities and by third parties to advance that. And obviously, there needs to be, as battery storage sort of progresses, changes in technology to really make that resource as impactful as it can be. You want long duration storage. And again, Senator Waters touched on, an evolving technology of vehicle to grid, where, if you have a battery sitting in your garage, can the utility call on that, or more practically, can an aggregator, a third-party aggregator, respond to price signals and call on that?
Senator Waters, you are recognized. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up a little bit on that one, it does seem to me that the slight changes about the EV vehicle to grid stuff and batteries in the bill just build on what we've done with storage previously. And my particular question about that is that I don't think you're implying that the current dockets before the PUC on EV really have anything to do with that aspect of the bill?
I know that, so to answer whether we have concerns about the inclusion of vehicle to grid as sort of an expansion of the existing storage definition, I don't believe so is the short answer. I need to check back with folks as we're still evaluating the bill. There is, I know there was recently discussion in one of the proceedings, I think it was the electric vehicle time of use rate, about sort of vehicle to grid and metering associated with that. If it's required sub-metering, I believe there's discussion of a pilot to pair utility meters with EV meters, EV charging meters, to compare for accuracy's sake. So those are some discussions that are ongoing related to some concepts in the bill.
Yeah, I'm good for now. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you. You're on an area that I was thinking of with this grid integrated electric vehicle. I have a generator at home. We have a power outage. We have to have a safety switch that protects the grid when we're pushing power into our own stuff, so we're not feeding it back into the grid. If you've got all these small batteries all over the place, how would you ever protect the grid in a storm with a power outage where you've got multiple sources of power going back in when the grid is down?
You would have to, so when an outage is not occurring, then obviously the grid is live, it's electrified, and so the two-way flow of power, you would sort of consider it the same as a solar project that's exporting, so it's all live. But the concern of generator backfeed is what we call it today, is a real one. It's something we actually warn our crews about constantly, because even though there is the code requirement for that bypass switch, it's not always the case with some folks who do their own wiring. And so obviously that's an area that's addressable through that bypass switch, that during an outage, if someone is relying on their F-150, I've seen the commercial, it's pretty cool, to act as a Tesla Powerwall type of battery storage application, that you would have that bypass to make sure obviously our line workers can operate and restore safely.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And, Consumer advocate. Don, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Avard, honorable members of the committee. My name is Donald Crease. I'm the consumer advocate, as you now know all too well. My job is to represent the interests of residential utility customers. Senate Bill 166 has what I consider to be a somewhat innocuous title, something about grid modernization, but I think this might just be the most consequential bill to come before this committee in the current session, and I'd like to explain why, at least briefly. If adopted, among other things, this legislation takes some modest steps, gradualism being the New Hampshire way, toward an era of transactive energy, a term that appears in the bill. Much like grid modernization, transactive energy is one of those utility industry buzzwords that bounces around and causes me to reach for my wallet. Here's what I mean when I talk about transactive energy. Transactive energy is the premise of New Hampshire's 1996 Restructuring Act, taken to its logical conclusion at long last. Now, via the Restructuring Act and related federal legislation, we opened wholesale electricity to free market transactions among buyers and sellers. And the Restructuring Act opened up the retail market as well, but really only to sellers. Now it's time to think about going all the way and allowing free-flowing retail electricity transactions among both sellers and buyers, so that we, as neighbors, can buy and sell electricity with each other. And if we do it at distribution voltage, and if we do it at a suitably small scale, we can avoid federal jurisdiction as well as the hassle and the expense of the bulk power transmission system. Now, as you know, the ratepayers are the only wallet in the room, so a lot of my counterparts around the country are into saying no to innovation because the bill always goes to ratepayers. But I would rather be remembered for what I helped build rather than what I helped to stop. So, I have a dream. In the parlance of a recent report from the consulting firm Black & Veatch, here it is, supplied to me by my friend sitting behind me, Sam Evans-Brown, it's called a highly distributed peer-to-peer distribution system operator model. In other words, says Black & Veatch, neighbors selling electricity to neighbors. Senate Bill 166 doesn't go there, but it takes a few highly useful baby steps in that direction. Here is what is awesome and cool about that, a profound resonance with the state's 10-year energy strategy as issued by the state's Department of Energy. My reasons for thinking that include, but are not limited to, Goal 3 of the energy strategy: adopt all resource energy strategies and minimize government barriers to innovation. Goal number 6, government intervention in energy markets should be limited, justifiable, and technology neutral. Goal number 7, a robust market selection of cost-effective energy resources. Goal 8, in-state economic activity without reliance on permanent subsidization of energy. Transactive energy hits all 4 of those goals. Now, it is possible that there are 1 or 2 people in the room who don't share my enthusiasm for the Sununu administration's 10-year energy strategy. There might even be 1 or 2 people in the Senate who have that opinion. Here's what I have to say to those folks. And here I'm pandering to Senator Waters in particular because he's always giving me book recommendations. I just read a fabulous book by a left-leaning policy guy named Matt Stoller called Goliath, The 100-Year War Between Monopoly Power and Democracy. He tells that story. It's a great book in lurid detail. And here is his conclusion. Our increasingly corrupt corporate apparatus was brought to us by people selling a fantasy of inevitability, but that is not true. America has always been a nation of tradespeople. We embed social justice in our banks, our corporations, our markets, in how we exchange goods, services, crops, ideas, and labor with one another. The real question is not whether commerce is good or bad. It is how we are to do commerce to serve concentrated power or to free ourselves from concentrated power. What literally is the opposite of concentrated power? transactive energy. Ergo, we should start the journey by enacting Senate Bill 166. Now, I've been listening to the other witnesses testify, and I just want to highlight a few specific things about the bill. One is that on page 8 of the bill, there is reference to my office entering into a contract with a consultant for technical support concerning distribution systems. And that's really important because one of the hardest things for me and anybody who isn't a utility to do is to bring the right level of expertise to conversations that get highly technical involving electricity. And so the idea here is to make that kind of expertise available to a bunch of stakeholders, my office, the Department of Energy, other people who want to participate. The bill lodges the responsibility for contracting with that consultant in my office for the simple reason that we know how to do that and we have the authority to enter into contracts that then go to governor and council for approval, and we know how to administer contracts. But I don't want the committee to think that the idea is we get that expert and will be the exclusive user of that expert. It really is a very communitarian idea. It's one that we tried to get the commission to embrace through the grid modernization docket, and the commission, I guess, was somewhat skeptical about that. The other point I'd like to make is the bill has a fiscal note, but it shouldn't, because there is no fiscal impact here on the state or on any of the subdivisions of the state. There is always a ratepayer impact. The ratepayers are the only wallet in the room. But as I understand fiscal notes, that's not the point of a fiscal note. The point of a fiscal note is to make sure you know when you're going to have to appropriate money for something. There's no need to do that in this instance. Mr. Licata mentioned the last Eversource rate case and the agreement that came out of that rate case to study the feasibility of advanced metering infrastructure. And I just want to say that it was my office that pushed harder than anybody, I think, for that particular provision in the settlement agreement that resolved that rate case. And while I think it's just terrific that Eversource is getting around to hiring that consultant and moving forward with that feasibility study, and with all due respect to Mr. Licata and all of my other friends at Eversource, what's really happening here is the state's biggest utility has lagged way behind on the question of deploying advanced metering infrastructure. That has held the state back. It's held the state's ratepayers back, and it's time to move forward. It's past time to move forward. I think that's all I have to say at this point. I'm really pleased with the collaborative effort that has led to the development of this bill so far. It looks like there's still a bit more work to do. I'm honored to be a part of it. I'm honored to be named as a member of the proposed Grid Mod Advisory Group, and we look forward to participating in that once this bill becomes law. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Stop the revolution, brother.
I didn't say that. I just was pandering to people who don't like the state energy strategy, if there are any.
You strike that one. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Clifton Delo, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Assistant Mayor of the City of Lebanon. But today, excuse me, today I'm here on behalf of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, which is a joint power agency that is also a governmental instrumentality of 28 subdivisions of the state. Our 27 municipal members at this point represent more than a fifth of the state's population. And we're here to strongly support Senate Bill 116. Happy to work with Senator Waters, Senator Quokka, Senator Avard, your co-sponsor, Mike Licata, anyone else in perhaps coming up with an amendment. But I think there's many good things here about this bill and many important things. There are a lengthy set of findings. They kind of provide a lot of history and background. What I want to point to is a few key things, which is what this bill is about is, I think, really fulfilling some of the promise of electric utility restructuring. New Hampshire has in its constitutional DNA an aversion to monopolies and a clear preference for competitive markets. It's stated right in our Constitution. Free and fair competition in the trades and industry is an inherent and essential right of the people and should be protected against all monopolies which tend to hinder or destroy it. And in the restructuring statute, I just was reading, it is in our Constitution, but also from RSA 374F, which passed by a nearly unanimous vote in the House and Senate 27 years ago. And that immediately following that quotation of the Constitution, it went on to say competitive markets should open markets for new and improved technologies, provide electricity buyers and sellers with appropriate price signals. And that wasn't defined in the statute. And some of the findings sort of hint at or point in the direction of what might be an appropriate price signal, but it's the basic concept that we wanted to create. I say we because I was in the House at the time and was one of the primary sponsors of the legislation, along with Senate President Bradley at the time, worked very closely for several years to develop the restructuring statute. But it did set forth a path of saying the generation part of the business should move to a market base in which consumers have choice and in which it's recognized that you have to develop both wholesale and retail electricity service markets is an essential element of a restructured industry. And a huge amount of work has gone into developing the competitive market in the wholesale side of things, but it is simply lopsided. We don't have, at the retail level, access to the same price signals that are available in the bulk wholesale market. And just as an instance of that, just looking at the ISO New England app, oh geez, 5 or 10 minutes ago, the price of power was down around zero. Within the past couple of hours, it's been negative 2.5 cents, and it's been as high as 25 cents a kilowatt hour. This is the New Hampshire LMP, meaning if you were in that little dip spot and you were able to respond to that price, you could have actually gotten paid for consuming energy. And if you had access to know that you could shave your peak at that time, you could save money. And the reason there's so much value to be unlocked here by enabling retail customers, not necessarily on an individual basis, but a lot through automation, to be able to engage and be part of this market is because the whole system has to be designed to have enough capacity to meet peak demand plus a safety margin. Most of the cost of electricity is the embedded cost of capacity in generation, transmission, and distribution. And over the past several decades, we've been having a peakier system in which what's called the asset utilization factor or load factor, meaning the total load in proportion to the capacity of the system has dropped from around 2/3 to a little more than 50%. That means that the cost, all those costs are being spread over fewer kilowatt hours. If we could reverse that trend with appropriate price signals, such as in transactive energy, by shaving the peaks and filling the valleys, we would shift the dynamics so that we're spreading all those fixed costs over more kilowatt hours rather than less. And with the enormous push in so many levels to electrify transportation and potentially building heating loads, there is already a huge amount of flexible demand on this system, and there's going to be even more so in the future. And so an example of this is the New Hampshire Electric Co-op, which is in the process of implementing a transactive energy pilot that involves not just like devices like a hot water heater that could preheat hot water when the price is cheap, turn it on when you're going to get paid for electricity, and turn it off when the price goes high and you've got some hot water stored up at a lower cost. They're also piloting the grid-enabled vehicles to be able to export power to the grid and be managed by third parties that can say, okay, if you'll just let us use your car or your school bus when it's parked to either turn on charging when it's cheap or turn off charging when it's high within the parameters of, okay, I got to get the car charged by a certain amount of time. You can manage all those things and you end up with a better system. What is unique about electricity is that it's a huge interconnected machine. It's been said to be the largest, the Eastern interconnection in North America specifically, the largest single machine in human history, because everything that happens, I turn off this microphone, I cut electricity, it actually has a minuscule impact that ripples throughout the whole system. And supply and demand, load and generation have to stay in near perfect balance all the time to keep the system stable. So the idea of transactive energy is basically the idea, let's use markets to the extent we can with appropriate price signals to help manage that balancing instead of what we used to have, which was a top-down regulatory approach saying, okay, you monopoly, go out and try to manage all these different systems to keep things balanced. And we've made a choice in New Hampshire and New England to say, no, let's try to use markets. And essentially, the wholesale market run by ISO New England is a transactive energy market. It's a transaction. It's just that load is not able to participate very well in that system. Let me just point to a couple of specific things. I could go on at considerable length about this because I've been working on it for 25 or 30 years. But I do think that this bill has a lot of elements that can help move us forward and provide some direction to the PUC, DOE. And just turning to page 6 of the document, where it incorporates a little bit of language around some of the restructuring principles. These don't actually mandate any particular action. The context that they appear in is in restructuring. It says the following interdependent policy principles are intended to guide New Hampshire's PUC, Public Utilities, and Department of Energy in implementing, and it goes to kind of go on because implementation has sort of already happened, but in the ongoing regulation and management of a restructured electric utility industry. So they're interdependent. They're intended to be a guidance going forward. So one thing it says on line 16 to 18 of page 6 is that interconnection requirements and such should be consistent with New Hampshire's energy policy, which is a fairly simple statement. It's just one long sentence in our statutes that says General Court declares it shall be the energy policy of the state to meet the needs of its citizens and businesses at the lowest reasonable cost. Those are key words, lowest reasonable cost, while providing for reliability and diversity of energy resources, maximize cost-effective efficiency and demand response, and to provide safety and health of citizens, physical environment, future supply of resources, and consideration of the financial stability of the utilities. So all that being said, what is going on now with interconnection, which is a big barrier for more distributed resources, is the utilities, because it doesn't fit within the paradigm of let's go for the lowest reasonable cost solution, because from the utilities point of view, it's the interconnecting generation that has to pay for all the upgrades. They tend to say, let's go with the gold-plated option. Let's go, we don't care about the cost because you're going to have to pay for it. And I'll just give an example of this. The city has been trying for about a decade to develop a 1 megawatt landfill gas to energy project, and with some solar at our landfill. And the first interconnection company study came back and said that's going to be about $750,000. I'm like, whoa, you know, that's like, you know, numbers not sure they pencil with that much interconnection cost. So with a little bit of revision, we got that down to $500,000. We said we'll go forward. We went forward. We signed an interconnection agreement a year ago. And we are a full year later after we signed it with a time schedule that would have this going online in a month or two. We went ahead and spent money, ordered the microturbines, ordered the gas processing skid. only to find out in the past month that National Grid, Liberty Utilities has never signed an agreement with National Grid because they loop National Grid in and they say, oh, we would like some improvements on our side of the substation too. And oh, by the way, it'll take us 18 months to do those. And they still don't have an agreement. Well, that's no skin off Liberty's back because they don't really care. Apparently, it just hasn't been a priority. And yet we could be, it's costing us on the order of $750,000 from this delay. Not their problem. And just as an example of that, we said, okay, we'd like to put a little bit of more PV on one of these buildings. So to add 24 kW of PV, they said, well, that'll cost you $250,000 in additional upgrade. And we said, okay, why is that? It's because we want a dedicated fiber optic line from the substation to your generation so we can have redundant anti-islanding protection based on sort of a general guidance. There's no actual standard for this. And we said, there's actually, when you think about it, this anti-islanding is in the, this hypothetical event that we island because load and generation on this circuit is in perfect balance at the same time that we lose grid power. And we said, well, you could do this wirelessly for a third of the cost, and other utilities are doing it that way. But if we had a standard that say at the lowest reasonable cost that provides comparable or greater safety, then it would be a no-brainer. Let's go with this approach. So I'll wrap up here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Nick, you get all that down? Your fingers are just going wicked fast.
So just turning to, and 5 is the same thing. It's just saying, let's move in the direction of enabling these market-based approaches at the distribution level, at the customer level. But section 6 on page 6 simply enables the commission to approve tariff revision that could enable cost sharing. It doesn't actually prescribe what that might be. That would have to be developed. But let me just give a simple example. In Lebanon, city of Lebanon, we ran into a situation where our sewer lines were near capacity in some areas that were people wanted to develop, both industrial and multifamily housing. And we said, well, we don't have the capacity. So one of them said, okay, what if I upgrade the sewer line? It's 6 inches now. If I go to 8 inch, it'll be enough capacity to support our project. So the city said, well, if you're going to dig up the roads and put in this upgrade, we want to go to 10 or 12 inches because that'll provide capacity for the next one that comes along. And the increased pipe is a small portion of the total cost of digging it up and putting it in. And there was some pushback saying, well, we're paying for something that's going to benefit another project. So we amended our ordinance to say, okay, if that's the case, you've created capacity for somebody else to come along. Then once they come along, then they'll pay a share of that and you'll kind of get paid back. We as the city are the utility operator, so we could do that. In this case, neither the utility nor the PUC have any authority to approve such a thing in the arrangement. So we're saying, okay, we'll go ahead as the city and spend $600,000 in interconnection upgrades. It'll open up a large amount of capacity on the circuit and substation for others to come along. We're willing to foot that bill because as a city, we want to enable these things. But wouldn't it be nice if, because we've created that capacity, somebody else can come along and interconnect at no cost, if they could pay us back a pro rata share of the capacity that we created by our investment. So section 6 simply enables that. It doesn't really need, what needs to be thought through is how would that work, and that is the role of the Grid Modernization Advisory Group that can help with that. I'll try to cut this short and just say that there's many specific details in here, but they all go towards advancing and enabling us to access these resources. And the thing I didn't say that I wanted to say is why this can create so much value is every day generation bids into this wholesale market, and at low levels, a lot of people put in very low bids. A nuclear power plant, wind project, solar, they're like, we'll take whatever price is available. And as you get to higher and higher, they say, well, we'll run if you pay us, 5 cents, 10 cents, 15 cents. There's a curve, a price curve. And at low levels, the price increases very slowly. As you get to high demand, the price goes up and it gets very steep at our peak coincident demand at times. And if you can just shift flexible load from those peaks, the price comes down pretty quickly by modest reductions in load. You shift that load to the low periods of time, the price goes up, but only a tiny bit. So you've saved a lot on the high end and only cost a little bit more on the low end. And you've also potentially avoided having to invest in more capacity, which is really expensive these days. So this bill tries to go at the New Hampshire approach of harnessing the power of competitive markets to move us forward and empower innovation in competitive markets. Thank you.
Thank you for your very informative testimony. We appreciate it. Are there questions from the committee? We appreciate your expertise. Yeah. Josh Elliott. Top that.
I can't.
We appreciate you all coming and testifying on these.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs, the Department of Energy. I will be brief. I know a lot has been already said here. I know it sounds like there's going to be a couple of folks working on an amendment. Of course, the department's happy to be involved in sort of getting into the little finer details. I know I've shared a couple of those small little nitty-gritty things with Senator Waters. I guess really sort of talking about this transactive energy, just a couple of things to keep in mind. And this is by no means a complaint or saying you shouldn't do this or this is not a good thing, but just in terms of experiences from other states. You know, probably saw Texas during some of their heat waves. They had a lot of sort of programmable thermostats. There were a number of people who knowingly signed up to be part of these demand resources, and then were upset when their thermostat couldn't go any lower than 80. So there's certainly a giant consumer education component to a lot of these things and participating in these markets. I will say, it's always good to be looking at these things, always good to look. The department's always in favor of greater transparency when it comes to price. Markets can react, demand can react, supply can react, and those market forces are the most efficient way in order to either meet demand or to drive down demand or to increase supply or reduce supplies depending on the circumstances. But with that, I'm always happy to hear that people are reading and absorbing the state energy strategy. But I will say just as much as it is important to be penny wise, rather than being penny wise and pound foolish, you also shouldn't be pound foolish and penny wise.
Questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thanks so much, Josh. And as I said at the beginning, thanks so much for your help on this up to this point, and I'm sure going forward, because we got some work to do in the bill. So I just wanted to bracket off some areas. The Department of Energy is good with the advisory group.
Yes, I think we had talked about just changing one of the members from the consultant, but yes, the concept, no objections.
And you didn't really have much comment about the consultant, but it would help you out, wouldn't it, if there's somebody who could help you with the technical issues?
Yes, as the department usually for these types of services, we'd have to go out to contract anyway. If there's would be recoverable from all ratepayers. If there's concern about cost, it could probably be a not to exceed limit or something like that if that is a concern.
Yeah. And so, we've heard from Michael Okada and others about, some of the rough points here. So would it be fair to say from your perspective that maybe some of these issues we'll find a way to do them on the transactive energy side, because I think there are some that are doable now, but others might get pushed over into the advisory group, and you think that the Department of Energy would be able to kind of in running that group be helpful to get some more clarity on those remaining issues.
Yeah, I think there's a couple between those two, as well as sort of other ongoing things. I know Michael Okada had mentioned a couple of things the department's currently engaged in the interconnection study and things like that. So there might be different pieces that sort of end up in different have different resolutions.
Thanks again.
Questions?
I'm glad I didn't have to go first.
Thank you very much. We
Thank
have
you,
no
Mr.
further
Chairman.
questions. And our final speaker is Sam Evans Brown. I think we still have 3 more bills to hear after this.
And I know I really have to be quick on this one. Many of the points that I would have made have already been said, which is the hazard of going last. For the record, I'm Sam Evans Brown, Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire. One, I think just to sort of highlight the potential here, I wanted to just do run some back of the napkin math that I was doing as I was preparing this testimony. So ISO New England forecasts that in New Hampshire, which lags behind the rest of the region in electric vehicle adoption, but is still expected to see dramatic increases in the number of electric vehicles on the road. They're forecast to be around 60,000 EVs registered in New Hampshire by 2030. You run some math on how big each of those batteries is. We're talking about 3.5 gigawatt hours of storage, which is a lot. That's just within the state of New Hampshire. Average driver of an electric vehicle goes about, or average driver of any vehicle in America goes about 35 miles a day, which means they're using a small fraction of that battery every day. As a whole, across those 60,000 vehicles, of that 3.5 gigawatt hours, only 0.6 gigawatt hours are needed. So that's 3-ish gigawatts of storage that are going to be located in New Hampshire as a resource that drivers are going to purchase anyway, based on existing forecasts. So what we're talking about is taking an existing asset and deploying it for its value to New Hampshire ratepayers. It would be a valuable revenue stream for car owners. It would be just an untapped resource that is just going to be sitting in garages unless we establish a rate structure through which folks can be reimbursed for that. So we are in support of the bill. I understand that there are perhaps issues with it that we look forward to working through with the stakeholders, but I just want to keep the committee's eyes on the prize here, which is that there's a huge resource out there that we can use to lower our electric rates.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Pearl.
Thank you for coming in today. I don't know if you can answer this or not. So when I'm tapping my trees, I use these electric drills with the lithium batteries. 2 thoughts come to mind. 1, they don't like cold weather. And 2, they only have so many times that I can recharge them before they no longer will accept the charge. If we're using these batteries on people's vehicles in a bidirectional fashion, are we lowering the life expectancy of them quicker than if they were just using them for their own purposes?
The answer to that is yes, which is why customers should be reimbursed for that service that they're providing to the grid. Batteries have gotten a lot better. I recently bought a used EV myself, so I did a lot of research into the battery degradation question. And on average, EVs are losing about 2% of their capacity a year when in the current EV models that are out there. I would say, though, that the automotive industry is very aware of this limitation and is working very hard on making better batteries. So I wouldn't forecast that degradation rate would stay the same out into the future as the batteries start to improve. And that said, that 2% is already dramatically better than the first generation EVs, which had serious battery degradation problems. But you're right about the cold. You know, when I was dropping my kid off at preschool this morning, you certainly notice when the heat's running and you have many fewer miles of range in the cold weather.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much. And I have nobody else to speak on this bill, so we're going to close the hearing and go to the next one. How you guys liking this? Yeah, it's fun, huh?
It's like a seminar, isn't it?
It really is.
Don't ask me to take a quiz after.
No. It's a lot of information. I understand that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to introduce my bill after. I'm just going to ask for a refer. I don't want to get into it. I'm just going to refer it. It's not ready for prime time. On my bill. Okay. Senator Waters, we recognize you. And you're going to be introducing 167. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Waters, District 4.
Thank you.
Introducing Senate Bill 167 relative to green hydrogen energy and infrastructure. And I point into your folders that I've got a couple of articles in there for you. One is really about the science, technology, and chemistry of hydrogen, so you can have a little primer there if you want. And then the other more important document related to the IRA shows just what the huge opportunities in the funding coming forward into hydrogen are. So you'll see what we have there. So to introduce the bill, I just
Somebody's phone's going off, I apologize.
Oh, my phone's going?
Is that, I don't know, it's
No,
got good
somebody
rhythm.
over here.
We're all set.
Okay, sorry. With my hearing, I don't hear him anyway, so I'll take your word
Wow,
for
we
it.
were boogieing up here.
Aside from offshore wind, hydrogen is likely to be one of the largest and most transformative changes in energy supply in coming decades. It has a vast potential for use as a storage fuel for offshore wind and other sources. It has a vast potential for power generation, for industrial uses which need a high energy fuel, and I think also very much so for transportation in heavy vehicles, interstate trucking. There are rapid technological developments involved electrolyzing hydrogen at a much cheaper cost, and particularly using renewable sources like solar and offshore wind, and some others, like steam from a nuclear power plant byproduct to do this. These rapid technological developments are a result of and encouraging major investments by energy companies, by governments. I give you that IRA information, tens and tens of billions of dollars, especially in the EU and the United States. This means that the projections are the competitive prices are on the horizon for hydrogen, and eventually by perhaps by the late 20s will be a very, very competitive fuel source. So, given what is happening here, this bill is about making New Hampshire ready for this. I said a lot of times, I'm just a jobs and economic development center, bottom line. I'm concerned that New Hampshire be known as open for business, that we'll be competitive, so we can get this investment and these jobs. Let me note, there's $7.1 billion that's going out the door pretty soon in the transportation bill for pilot projects on hydrogen. There's a consortium that has the New England states, New Hampshire is considering joining, plus New York and New Jersey, to advantage those pilot programs that might be coming out of there, and Liberty Utility is involved in one of those that has made the cut for that. There are tens of billions of dollars in the IRA for hydrogen. So the money is going to be there and the grants are going to be there. Are we going to be in a competitive framework so we can get some of that funding? It's a huge opportunity, and I want to mention some particular New Hampshire opportunities for this economic investment. I mentioned offshore wind. Offshore wind needs a storage fuel. If we have 3.6 gigawatts, and again, that's about 3 Seabrooks, out there in the Gulf of Maine, it's going to get auctioned next summer, then hydrogen electrolyzed at the site of the turbine, potentially loaded onto vessels there, so you don't have to you don't have to have pipelines coming in, will provide the backup fuel for generation when the wind doesn't blow or when you need other capacity on the grid. We also have, not just related to offshore wind, because our port is going to become much more developed for servicing offshore wind. The construction phase, $3 to $5 billion. The supply chain and maintenance, $12 to $15 billion. Marine hydrogen is becoming a very important fuel for fueling boats, and for not just the boats that serve offshore wind, but coastal transportation of other kinds. I think also there's enormous opportunity for investing in New Hampshire for power generation, particularly potential to replace the coal station with hydrogen-fueled turbines. Also, the potential in other places for replacing, either in not operating power plants or ones that are on other, jet fuel and other fuels which are very expensive, could go to hydrogen as well. I think in particular for the area of the conjunction of Route 95 and Route 16. To me, that has written all over an opportunity for federal funding for hydrogen fueling for interstate trucking. Interstate trucking, I do not think will be, despite what Tesla's rolling out, I think it's much more likely interstate trucking is going to be on hydrogen because of the fueling infrastructure it needs. Cummins, the largest manufacturer of diesel engines in the United States, is making its biggest bet right now on electric produced by hydrogen in their trucks. So these opportunities are there. You can see, and on the bill too, I want to turn to the bill now. This bill is a result of a lot of cooperations with other states. It's also consultation with the hydrogen industry groups, utilities here in state, and developers here in the state as well. So the first thing the bill does, again, modeled on the 7 or 8 other states that have passed similar legislation, is to provide some definitions of what do we mean by green hydrogen, how is it produced, and how is the state going to look at that in our state statute. Now, I think we're going to hear, and I want to mention right here, though, I think we're going to do a little more work on these definitions. Inadvertently, it does seem to exclude the use of excess heat generation from Seabrook or other nuclear, and that'd be a great thing to be able to use to produce hydrogen. I think also that we may want to change the definition a little bit to a kind of an industry standard that the hydrogen advocates have pointed out to talk about non-carbon sources rather than just mentioning solar and wind and we add steam to that. I think also we're going to have to take into account in the definitions the blending of hydrogen into natural gas that is already permitted up to 15% by federal regulations, and is likely that hydrogen can participate in kind of a bridge fuel there. And also if you have a power plant that can operate in hydrogen, but sometimes you need to have some gas operating it as well. I mean, these are kinds of things that the future and the industry are likely to think. So maybe we need some flexibility there. You'll see after that on page 2, this is a bill about getting us open for business. So I put on lines 12 to 17 the potential of a tax credit against the BPT. We do this in some other areas, and I thought that this was worthy of consideration. It really is an issue for finance and actually for Ways and Means to take a look at this, but that is why that is there. It in a way is what the Research Development Tax Credit program is all about in this state, is fostering new technologies. Then turning to, I think, an important issue in lines 21 to 23. Right now, hydrogen is permitted and evaluated by the local fire marshal. Now, that makes a lot of sense. You've got a couple tanks of hydrogen, it's your business. But if you're talking about major power generation, I do not think that the local fire marshal has the capacity, the expertise, or can carry the cost of doing that kind of evaluation. So that's why here it says if it's over 20 megawatts, which is pretty small actually, it goes to the state fire marshal. And they would be the one in consultation with the local fire marshal. But I really think if we're talking about, like as we do with other siting of power plants, I think that should be up to the state, and of course the SEC will be involved in potentially in that as well. So guess what? Like the last bill, we got an advisory committee established, and I think that again this is very much modeled on Montana, Illinois, Utah, Nevada, some other states that are going gung ho on hydrogen. That we ought to have a group that can get together and see, okay, what do we need to do at the agency, at the executive, and at the legislative level to work with our businesses, work with our utilities. I particularly included here the port because that is likely to be a focus for some hydrogen infrastructure development, and I included Granite Shore Power because that is a business that is likely to be involved in this as well. And so you'll see here the kind of general charge to the committee at the bottom of that page. And then top of page 3, identify opportunities, identify barriers to development here of hydrogen, consider a plan, consider, the pipeline issue or network of pipelines. I'm going to have to take a look at as well. Take a look at this blending into existing natural gas transmission. Again, it's permitted by the feds, but we probably ought to take a look at that as well. Particularly lines 14 and 15, I hate to say it, but a lot of the power industry looks at New Hampshire and says, the place not to go, that they just can't get it done there. And it bothers me. I think that particularly, I've talked about offshore wind, I've talked about hydrogen now. We have got to be open for business because all the states around us are. Yeah. And so that's why some of that is there. I'm going to get some reports for them, and then you got the Division of Fire Safety that goes up, adds to what I had on page 2 in the bill. So just to conclude, I just think we've got to got to make New Hampshire an opportunity state. We need jobs, we need industry, and this transformative power source really has great potential for the state. And I think the bill will get us in a good position. I also think the bill signals to the industry that we take this seriously. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate all your hard work and your ability to actually discuss this with us. The questions from the committee. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark Brown? We're going to lose a senator here. You're here, right? No, you don't wish to speak. Sorry about that. My apologies. What's that? Kinda. No. We're going to lose some senators very shortly because of the scheduling. So, Sam Evans Brown, are you related to Mark?
I'm not. I also think I listed myself as not.
You did. So my blood sugar is getting down. James Andrews. You're right. In support, wishing to speak.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Avard, committee members. For the record, my name is James Andrews. I'm President and CEO of Granite Shore Power, testifying in support of Senate Bill 167. Granite Shore Power is a wholesale electric generator providing over 1 gigawatt of seasonal and peaking electric generation from its 11 fuel-diverse generating stations located throughout New Hampshire. Granite Shore Power has operated these facilities since its acquisition of the assets from PSNH in 2018, following the state-mandated divestiture. Granite Shore Power's generating stations are essential resources within ISO New England, assuring reliable electricity to the families and businesses of New Hampshire when needed most. From our earliest days, GSP's message has been consistent and clear. Our generating fleet can be depended on, whether on our coldest nights or hottest days. And we serve an essential and safe bridge to the next generation of energy resources in New Hampshire. We strongly support such a transition, and we will play an important role providing power to businesses and families in our region during that process. We encourage a constructive dialogue about how best to achieve our shared decarbonization goals and advancing a renewable and reliable energy infrastructure for the New England region. If New Hampshire is going to benefit from energy transition and renewable energy opportunities, not only decarbonization efforts, but also economic growth, it is imperative that the state encourage capital be invested directly in New Hampshire to support infrastructure projects. New Hampshire is well suited to take advantage of its highly qualified trade professionals and educational institutions, and its favorable tax climate to compete for the businesses that will support projects, and most importantly, its existing major infrastructure necessary to transition the region to the next generation of energy resources and drive New Hampshire commerce. We commend the sponsor and co-sponsors for putting SB 167 forward, and we strongly support it. This bill will help New Hampshire lead the way, enabling energy and infrastructure projects that are truly transformative. Moreover, establishing an advisory committee that actively engages the private sector and will recommend sound policies is the right thing to do. That committee will consider legislation that will incentivize new investments we need and optimize siting to adjacent existing infrastructure. It is critical that this work begin now, so we are not disadvantaged by other states acting more aggressively. We should lead in this area, and this bill will help New Hampshire do just that. Thank you for the opportunity to share our views, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, you did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Keen? Yeah, didn't say you're in support or opposed, but you want to speak? Yes. Yeah. You're a representative?
Yeah, I'm from the DRA.
Oh,
I'm not representative. No, no, I represent the DRA.
all right. It looks like a representative badge.
No.
I would have let you go earlier.
No,
You should have just held on, or I could have get you right up front. That's all right. You're welcome. And it doesn't say opposed or
No.
in favor of it either way. So.
right. My name is Kim Min Wong. I am from the DRA, and the department does not have a position on this bill. However, there are portions of this bill that implicates the DRA specifically to the BPT credit claim. So that's a few things that we just wanted to highlight for the committee to consider, as well as for the sponsors to consider, in terms of assisting the DRA to administer this if it were to pass. First off is so it's all essentially on section 3 of the bill, which is page 2, lines 13 onwards. And it says that the credit is not more than 10% of the qualifying costs. Usually, if a credit is given, a specific number would be appreciated, as opposed to maybe 0 to 10%. So it's not really sure what's the rate. And then in terms of qualifying costs, it does say that it includes land improvements, constructions, and equipment, etc. However, it would be also good to have a definition of the qualifying costs. So what exactly is qualifying costs, and then including land improvements, constructions, and so forth. The other item that we wish to highlight is on line 16. It says that this credit shall also apply to plans to acquire new regenerative fuel cell electricity generation that began operation on or after July 1st, 2023. The potential issue is that the credit shall also apply to plans to acquire. So at what point would that trigger? So if the company would just have a plan, would that just trigger the ability to claim the credit? So that it would be good to have a definition. Say, okay, at what point there's a triggering point that would make it eligible for the company to claim that credit. And the last thing is that the bill shall be effective July 1st, 2023. Usually for tax purposes, we would prefer it if there is some sort of saying that the effective date shall be for taxable periods end date, like December 31st, 2024, or something like that. Therefore, it does not start in the middle of a taxable period, so it covers a full taxable period.
So for current taxable period?
So let's say if it's for taxable period end 2024, so you would say that the effective date the bill shall be effective as of taxable period ending on or after December 31, 2024.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And those are the things that we just wanted to highlight. And we did prepare a fiscal note. It's indeterminable from our point of view because we do not know the numbers of how many companies will take the benefit of this and the profitability and things like that. But I will be able to answer any questions if the committee has any.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senators,
I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks for pointing out those omissions.
any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not in with the DuPont Group. I can be quick because Senator. Microphone's on. I'm Jim Monahan with the DuPont Group. I can be quick because Senator Waters addressed most of the issues that I was going to talk to you about. In particular, Senator Waters made reference to making sure we get the definitions right. There's still some work to be done there. In particular, some of the issues he mentioned, but we're also conscious of the fact that we want to make sure that what we do with hydrogen in New Hampshire aligns with the IRA. As many people have already spoke with here today, there are billions of dollars that are going to go somewhere, and we need to make sure that we don't create any confusion over New Hampshire's definition of hydrogen versus what's in the federal statute. There's a lot of color coding that's going on, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, gray hydrogen, all actual things. So being careful in how we get that defined is important. Specifically, they avoided the color coding in the IRA and made reference to clean hydrogen. I'm not suggesting we necessarily do that, but we at least pay attention to what's developing there. So there are some broad definitions in the statute. As I shared with Senator Waters when we spoke about this yesterday, the Internal Revenue Service is in the process of gathering comments for further rulemaking on how they will be defining clean hydrogen for the purpose of the federal tax benefits. And so I think within Senate Bill 167, there should be a commitment for everybody to get that alignment correct so we don't unintentionally point capital investment away from New Hampshire. So.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
All right. Joe Harrison?
Sorry, I'm here for the next bill. That was my mistake.
Oh, no, you have to speak. We want to hear. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So I think the only one I have left is Josh from the department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs, Department of Energy. The department is neutral. I just wanted to flag one item on the advisory committee. I don't recall, I had to step out, so I'm not sure if Senator Waters mentioned in his testimony. Just changing on line page 2, line 30, where it's the chair of the site evaluation committee. I believe the intention was to do the administrator of the site evaluation committee. Per statute, the PUC chair is also the chair of the site evaluation committee, so he could potentially point himself twice and get 2 votes on this, which I believe is the intention.
We don't want that.
Inherently undemocratic.
So we'll fix that, I'm sure.
So other than that, I have no other comments.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to pipe in on this? Going once, going twice, and closing the hearing on this. Do you need a couple-minute break, or you all?
Next, right?
I am, yeah.
Go for it.
All right, I'm just gonna. Yeah, no, I'm just,
Okay, I am going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 168 and invite the prime sponsor, Senator Avard.
thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard, the prime sponsor of SB 168. This bill basically allows for the participation of certain large electrical generators in low to moderate income community solar projects. And it expands the eligibility of residents to benefit from the community solar additions. And having talked with a few people, I think my bill might need a little bit of work. And you know, for discussion, I'd like to let people who came to talk on the bill an opportunity to in support or against. So with that, I'm just going to leave my testimony at that.
Thank you, Senator Avard.
So, Madam Chair, you know, I think there's some great stuff in this bill.
I do too.
But, so your advice would be that we could retain it, and then if it seems like after some other actions have occurred this session that we need to do something, we can take a House bill and do what we got to do.
Yes, this is a tool in hand that we can use for future use, and I would highly recommend that we do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, too, Senator.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Josh Elliott?
Sorry, I'm trying to get my page here. Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs, New Hampshire Department of Energy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, the department is neutral on this bill. Just by way of background, these statutes were originally passed as part of Senate Bill 270 from last session that did a number of things, including establishing this new program to allow people who are enrolled in the Electric Assistance Program, or EAP, to basically serve as a base, a list in order for developers to come in, propose solar projects in which those folks currently enrolled in the Electric Assistance Program would be used as off-takers and essentially build the load for the development, for the solar development, and get a portion of the credit from that generation. So, originally started off as a concept from Eversource, sort of worked its way through a couple of different iterations and turned into Senate Bill 270. The department has been charged with developing and sort of launching that program. We are very close in order on this program, should be coming in the next couple of weeks. We engaged in a robust stakeholder process over the course of the summer, the fall, and the early winter, in terms of sort of fleshing out the program, what exactly it looks like, you know, sort of all the nitty-gritty stuff that, you know, between working with the utilities, developers, other advocates on the bill to make sure that, you know, the department is implementing the legislation in a way that both meets the intent of the statute and the intent of the legislature, as well as make sure that it's actually the way that we're proposing to implement it is actually manageable for both the developers and for the utilities, and as well as those customers who would actually be enrolled as part of the off-takers from these projects. So with that being said, you know, there's a couple of new ideas here, including, you know, getting information from the DRA for potentially, you know, whether it's the low, moderate income property tax relief program and other things like that. Those are all folks who are means tested. Their income has been verified, you know, in order to get that as sort of an additional qualifying eligibility. I'm trying to think of the correct phrase, but essentially they've qualified, they're eligible for this program, therefore they're eligible for this new categorical eligibility. There we go. I knew I'd get it eventually. That by, you know, you have this other list of folks out there. The original idea to start with the Electric Assistance Program, these people have also been income verified. We know their electric account, we know their electric account number, we know who their utility is, and all those other things. So it makes it very easy in terms of when you're assigning folks to list for these developers that you already know everything, that you know the information is current. I will say from doing the various assistance programs, having that current information is critical when you're trying to roll out benefits, because if that information is not accurate or up to date, it gets very, very messy. So That being said, a lot of good ideas here, potential fixes that could be used in the future, but given that we're just barely rolling out this program, again, we're going out for the RFP process to see, what developers have proposed for projects, and then going through and taking, as the statute requires, the best, the one that offers the greatest benefit to those EAP customers. So we're still going through that process. So at this time, I think, certainly ideas to consider potentially in the future once we see how the program works. I'm not going to say, the program's going to work perfectly in the first run out. There's always room for improvement, always things, we're not going to realize that we've run into despite the process has been going on. But, potentially, these ideas are worth looking at once we have a year under our belt to see how it works, where it needs improvement, and what could be done to fix it.
So Josh, on the bill here, and I appreciate the work that you're doing on the, getting the program going. But, the stuff on 18 to 22, is it your sense from what you're seeing and what you're putting together that we're going to be okay on the size? Or do you think that this is something that is going to be needed at some point?
I will say, so to first start off, that we have a lot of talented staff at the department who've done way more work on this than I have. So I just want to acknowledge them for all the work that they've been doing on rolling this out. That is a good question. I am not a developer. I don't, I know these things pencil out at certain points and don't pencil out at other points. There's other factors, including, we talked a lot about interconnection costs and things like that. There's certain economies of scale. Based on the statute of where there's only 6 megawatts of projects may apply for a designation. We haven't done the RFP yet, so that's coming. That's sort of the next step after that order is released. But we haven't seen what kind of projects come in yet. So once we get a sense there of, okay, is there a problem here, and either the size isn't right or things like that.
Yeah, I may follow up. That's why I'm asking, because it could be the time will be the essence. If you get the RFPs in, and it looks like they're bumping up against this, we can do something about it quick. But I would think if it starts to arise as an issue for the developers, you'll let us know.
Yes, of course. Yes, no, happy to let the committee know, as well as your colleagues in the House, that if we see these RFPs are not coming in the right way, that we'll certainly keep you apprised.
Thanks.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Joe, you're up, man. And thank you for taking the time to come.
Thank you. Joe Harrison, Rewild Renewables. We're a community solar development firm based out of New Hampshire, and I live in Franconia. And so
just a short ride.
Just a short little trek, but in a beautiful ride. So I'll be brief. The problem here that we're trying to address, obviously, is that rates in New Hampshire have just about tripled over the last 2 years, and the LMI community is always hit the hardest when energy prices go up. They have a smaller pie, and so if their electric bill is estimated to be $70 to $100 more expensive every month, that is a major impact. And so New Hampshire does have more tools in its tool belt that we have not exploited yet to help solve this problem. The biggest one that this bill addresses is scale with community solar projects. So right now, for the most part, you can only go up to 1 megawatt, which is about 3 acres of solar panels. That's the smallest cap of any New England state. And so I was recently, or not recently, but a couple of years ago in a meeting and heard the governor say that he doesn't want to pick winners and losers with energy, and he's not for giving out more incentives for one particular type of energy. This approach is not asking for any additional incentive. It's just saying, take the guardrails off, widen them a little, and let New Hampshire benefit from economies of scale, and then have the offtake, the energy credits from those projects go to LMI customers, saving them millions of dollars a year. And so we think the 1 megawatt initial start is great, but I think that this is it's just such a kind of easy opportunity to, with one small change, allow a narrow amount of up to 5 megawatt projects. In this bill, we've tried to say that those projects don't need the extra 3 cent, I think it is, adder that projects under a megawatt get under the low income program. So the default supply rate being so high creates an unbelievable opportunity where solar can compete without any additional incentive. All we need is the ability to do larger projects. And thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you for your testimony and for taking the time to come down here as well. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next we have Mike Licata. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Mike Licata, Eversource. I'll be brief. Just want to focus comments on lines 3 and 4 of the bill. So electric distribution utilities, as Josh explained, we don't have access to our customers' income levels. And the way that this had worked with the electric assistance expansion that the legislature passed back in November was the Department of Energy had worked with CAP agencies who do that income qualification, as Josh explained, and then they essentially just provided us with a list, and then we assigned the credit, based on that. And so, or eligibility based on that. And so I guess just as folks are considering future changes to this, we're happy to be helpful and suggest some language, but the current structure is a little awkward.
Yes.
Perfect. And
I thank
that's
you for
all.
that.
Happy to answer any questions if the committee has any.
Do you have a question? No? Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it. And I don't have anybody else signed up to speak on this. Going once, going twice. Oh, really?
I do.
Okay, go for it. Did you sign up?
I thought I did. I might have been late. Who knows? For the record, Sam Rose Brown, Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire. We have been involved in the stakeholder process of standing up SB 270 from last year, and I hear the Department of Energy's comments loud and clear that it's in the process of getting stood up. I think that if the ideas in this bill are good, a very easy way of dealing with that might be to push out the effective date, and we could work with DOE to try to determine if that might be a way to go about this. So that it doesn't muck up the first round, the first RFP that goes out. So just a thought.
It's a good thought. We can think about it. 'Cause that's what we do. All right, thank you for your testimony.
Do you want to do this one quick, exec?
Sure.
Good to go.
Yep. So with that, we're going to close the hearing on this. And
Exec?
so, real quick. Yeah, this is a quickie. All in favor of exec?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none. All right. Let's.
And Nick, this is on 56. You got the amendment on it? Yes, I did. Thank you. So while that's being passed out, Mr. Chairman, I'll move up to pass on Senate Bill 56, just so we can have discussion.
Is there a second? I will second.
So as you may recall, we heard this a little while ago. It's about the upland resources losses and just some adjustment to the compensatory payments, which is really the way to go on this. And you may recall Gary Abbott, the general contractors, had some questions about it. So I wanted to thank Gary Abbott, DOT, DES all got together and they worked on this amendment. They're all happy. It basically clarifies just where this is applicable and the need for it. Under the existing statute, it adds a little RSA piece there, a 482A30B, which makes that needed clarification. So everybody's good, and this will help developers as well as DOT.
So do you,
I will move the amendment
okay.
ought to pass.
0287S,
Second.
and discussion. All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm going to ought to pass as amended.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Who would like to take this out, Senator Waters? All right, Senator Waters will take it out, and I think that's going to be it for today, because I want Senator Pearl's here as well, but on the other ones. So with that, we're going to entertain the motion to get out of exec.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor, say aye. And we are going to motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Thank you, everybody. Love my job.
Sam, you got a minute?